Good afternoon, everybody. This is Elise Salisbury, Deputy Director of Sister Reach, and welcome and thanks for joining us for our Social Justice Preacher Series. Excuse me, Sister Reach is a 501c3 and reproductive justice organization that is based in the state of Tennessee, Memphis, Tennessee to be exact, where our founder and CEO is Sheree Scott. Our Social Justice Preacher Series is our monthly web-based program where preachers expound on social justice issues through a human rights and womanist, theological perspective. Our guest for today is LaDeia Joyce of the Positive Experience and Positively Dia. She is also a member of Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated, a graduate of the University of Memphis, and we are here to hear the information that you're here to share with us on a topic that is so important to our community. And so thank you again for those who have joined us here this afternoon. LaDeia, we are here to hear your gospel.
My gospel. Well, thank you. I'm going to say Pastor E for the rest of this afternoon for having me. It is befitting that we're having this discussion today, which is Southern HIV and AIDS Awareness Day. And if we know one thing about the South, we love our Jesus, we love our house of worship, we love our Christianity, no matter how messed up or backwards it may be at times. So having this discussion about Black women at the intersection of HIV and faith on Southern HIV and AIDS Awareness Day is kind of, serendipitous, because we didn't know when we picked the date that we would be doing this. So like she said, thank you for that wonderful introduction. I like to say I'm not a preacher and I don't play one on TV. I'm not going to give y'all 3 hoops in the holler today, but mine is more of a teaching, extrapolating statistics, finding cross references with the word, and making us think about how we can actually better serve and center Black women at the intersection of HIV and faith. If I need to qualify myself, I am sort of kind of like a PK. My parents are elders, ministers in the church. I once was a minister in my past life. I am a Black woman. And I was a woman who was serving in my ministry who was diagnosed with HIV. So I think I kind of may have some real lived life experiences that can help if you're out there, if you're a preacher, teacher, minister, pew member, to understand why we need to change our perspectives about how we view HIV and under the umbrella of faith. So let me give you some statistics that I use to kind of shape up today's conversation. So 86% of all Black women believe in God with a pure and unadulterated certainty. Yet 1 in 32 Black women will be diagnosed with HIV in her lifetime. So somewhere along the line, there is a disconnect. Where have we as a faith community, Mr. Mark? How many Black women in your congregation are either positive or at the point of being vulnerable of a positive diagnosis? And we aren't choosing to discuss it. And so I got these statistics. It's this whole place called Pew Research Center. They conducted a survey that spans across Christianity, Muslims, Buddhists, Hindus, Jews, and all those who are even religiously unaffiliated, but they still consider themselves religious. So that may be people who are into African spiritual work, things of that nature. But they found, again, that Black women outrank everybody. That's white folks, Hispanics, Asians, Latino. We outrank anybody. We're the most religious group of people in America. Again, 6% of us unadulterated faith in God. 80% of us Black women say that faith is very important. 79% of all Black women pray on a daily basis. Over half attend services weekly. If we look at the makeup of place of worship across the nation, predominantly we're comprised of Black women. Black women, again, are the second most vulnerable population of HIV transmissions behind same gender loving men. This correlation and the overlap of these statistics make it impossible for faith communities as a whole to continue to turn a blind eye to the intersection of Black women, faith, and HIV. This expands past the Christian threshold. This is about women in their wholeness. It's about Black women. It's about women of color. It's about Christian women, Hindu women, all types of women who are within the faith spectrum. We have far for too long romanticized the plight of the lives of women within the word. In the middle of this global and spiritual shift, it's time for us to do things differently. And it's time for us to do what Jesus did instead of simply asking, what would Jesus do? Now, if you're on the other side of this screen, I'm probably like, what did Jesus do? And I'm so glad you asked. When it came to women, specifically women that were deemed worthy of reproach, there was never a recorded instance of Jesus disgracing them, belittling them. He never reproaches them, and he never stereotypes them. He liberated and affirmed women in every instance where he was found in the word interacting with them. He liberated and affirmed that he didn't discriminate against women in any way. You never hear of Jesus speaking against in a discriminatory way against what women can and can't do, what they should and shouldn't do. He liberated, he didn't discriminate, and he never encouraged others to disparage them in his word or in his deed. So church, why do we so often find ourselves doing the complete opposite with Black women, moreover, Black women who've been diagnosed with HIV? How many women in your congregation are you speaking to who are positive or have the possibility of becoming positive? What theology are you teaching? Is it liberating? Is it merciful? Is it compassionate? Like Jesus demonstrated, especially in John 8, 1 through 11, when he was talking and he dealt with the woman who was in the act of adultery. Are you the Pharisee or are you acting like Christ? So pastors, ministers, teachers, are you pushing them outside the ark of safety, or are you vindicating and are you exonerating those women in your church with your theology? So how can we start to kind of break down this, the lack of exoneration of Black women, don't get, especially at the intersection of faith and Black women and HIV? After I read and started doing this, I was like, we need to really start having an open and honest dialogue about HIV, sex, healthy sex practices, and sexuality in the church. If we look at Black women, if we just look at HIV under the umbrella of church, the church has far too long viewed HIV as a homosexual abomination. So we got to first shift our perspective about how we view HIV. And in order for us to censor, because we've given focus, although negatively, to our brothers and sisters who identify as LGBTQ+ when it comes to the umbrella of HIV, but we have completely ignored Black women and their intersectionality in this. So we got to shift our thinking about what HIV is. But the reason why it may be hard for us to shift the thinking is because it would take Black men, Black heterosexual men in the church to see that they too play a part in HIV transmission. Because if you're talking about heterosexual Black women, we're not having sex. Statistics show that almost 90% of all HIV transmission among women is through heterosexual sexual contact. So that right there busts another myth wide open that Black women who are diagnosed with HIV get it through survival sex work or through drug addiction. Less than 10% of the cases documented with new transmissions are through anything other than sex. Heterosexual Black women are having sex with what we may perceive be heterosexual Black men, or it may be Black men who enjoy sex with both men and women, but who have not identified their sexuality. So in order for us to be able to have this dialogue, we got to shift our perspective about how we're seeing HIV in the church, outside of it being an abomination for them gay folk. I'm sorry, hear my heart. It's just, I'm talking from church. Secondly, we have to be able to have open and honest dialogue about sex and how it's been presented to us in the Bible. I mentioned John 8, 1 through 11 earlier, and that was a woman who was caught in the act of adultery. And the Pharisees found it. When I read it again, I was like, how did they catch it in adultery? What was y'all doing there to find it in the first place? But that's a whole nother question for a whole nother day. But they drug her in front of Christ, and they were like, yeah, she was caught, da, 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 da. And I read through it, and I was like, but why didn't they bring the man also? Because according to Mosaic law, both he and she were supposed to be brought in front of the church after being caught in front of adultery. But again, we're gonna bookmark that. But when the Pharisees brought the woman caught in adultery in front of Jesus, Jesus paid them no mind. He started writing in the dust with his finger, and he simply said, "Those who are among you who are without sin, you cast the first stone." He didn't even realize that they had left. He had to look up and be like, oh, they're gone. He looked at the woman and said, who among you accused you? And she said, no one. Jesus simply responded, said, go. And they said, don't do it again. And in that moment, he didn't condemn. He didn't bastardize. He didn't further marginalize her. He didn't make her say, he didn't put her in front of the church and try to sit her down. He asked her, who condemned you? Nobody. Okay, sis, don't do it again. That go was liberation for her, to go and live the rest of her life free of condemnation. But we don't talk about this story in the concept of being liberated. We don't preach from this John 8:1-11. We don't preach about it. We don't even talk about the man. He's just a figment of imagination after he's been caught by the Pharisees with the woman in an act of adultery. So we don't even talk about how there's a lack of responsibility that the church does not place on men when it comes to sexual immorality. Again, through the confines and eyes of the perspective of church. If we think about it, we go over to Esther 1 and 2. And this is my favorite girl, Vashti. I love her. Folks talk bad about her. Hashtag be more like Vashti. I think that's how I pronounce it. So we always hear about she was defiant, she was hard-headed, she was disobedient. But you have to think about, if we flip the way we preach this text and say that no, she was exercising self-efficacy. She was exercising body autonomy. She was exercising boundaries. Because if you don't know the story, her husband, the king, they had been drinking, celebrating for they say 7 days, and some people say it was longer than that. They had gone through this whole feast. They was drinking. He with his boys. It may be akin to Super Bowl Sunday. And your husband down the den with his brothers. And they drinking, his frat brothers at that. So they drinking, they kicking it this and third. And he be like, hey, baby, go put on that dress I like and come in here and walk around for the fellas. You're going to be like, do what? Now, mind you, it wasn't like 3, 4, 5 of them. It was like all the kings from the region. It was a whole heap of them. And because Vashti knew what her role was as a woman, as the king, she knew her role was, he was asking her to do something that went against who she was. Vashti wasn't hard-headed. She was exercising her boundaries. She was operating in the gift that she had been given at being placed in that role as queen, as a woman and a queen of that kingdom. She knew the very thing that he was asking her to do went against everything that she had been prepared for to serve and be a queen during that time. But so many pastors bastardize Vashti. And it's just like, no, she stood up, she set boundaries, but imagine what we can do for women. And the reason why I say is because if you think about Black women in church, if we know that by the age of 18, over half of women would have experienced some type of sexual assault by that time. And I'm not knowing how to exercise my boundaries. And if I read this for myself, and my understanding is like, no, sis, exercise her boundaries. But I come back in church and you're telling me she is to be demonized or bastardized for choosing to do that. I'm conflicted. I'm confused. And if I'm raised up under this type of word, I don't know then how to exercise boundaries and exercise healthy sexual relational boundaries with men as I age. So that's another example where we're not sure about the sex. He wanted her, the king wanted the wife to come and basically sexually exploit herself for the benefit of the company that they were keeping, because it was a celebratory moment. But then we flip that and talk about Queen Esther and how, like, oh, she, such a time as this. Queen Esther had to exercise her innovation to be able to get her point across and get her mission across for her people, because she then too has to exercise some efficacy and some autonomy to get what she needs to get across for her people during that time. But then we talk about and look at One Night with the King. Esther had to audition for her job, y'all. And when you spend one night with the king, we have romanticized what spending one night with the king was. Now, boo, you had to audition for your position to be a queen. And he sent you out the next morning. And if you did a good job, you were called back. We don't even talk about how old Esther may have been. Esther probably was like maybe 13, 14, 15, 16. And the king, he was old. But again, we don't talk about how sex and faith is a power play, and so many times. And then because we regurgitate these stories through this misogynistic view, you see how young women coming up in the church get caught up because the bishop understands the power play. The pastor understands the power play. And at times it can almost be like David did with Bathsheba. David went to go send the soldiers to go get Bathsheba. Pastor go send the armor bearers to bring you back to his quarters. And then you get caught up in this situation, you get pregnant, and here we go back at the woman of the well, and we pull you in front of the church and you're pregnant, but we don't see the man. So how all these stories that we have not been honest about in our teachings cause this misconstrued ideology about sex that have so long not only played out in our churches and place of worship, but have played out in our families. Like you think about how, yes, David, Bathsheba, and Uriah, he went to go get Bathsheba. So first of all, David was not where he was supposed to be at the time. He was supposed to be on the field fighting, but he was back at the palace. And he went up somewhere that he had no business being. He saw Bathsheba bathing, and he went and beckoned for her. Now, the word will teach that he laid with Bathsheba. No, he raped Bathsheba. Call a thing a thing. He raped her. She got pregnant. Then he goes and sends her husband to the front lines because he won't come back. When he summoned for him from the field, he knew Uriah, again, doing what he was supposed to be doing, didn't come back. So he had to hide the fact that he then impregnated one of his soldiers' wives, pushes him to the front line, and then he dies. Bathsheba begets Solomon. And if y'all ever read the Song of Solomon, it's a real sexual book. But then we think about who his daddy was and how he was conceived, then better understands what type of mindset, what kind of family, what kind of household he was birthed in to be able to write something like that. And then David's other son, we talk about Absalom. Then we talk about the orgy that he had with the 10 concubines when he couldn't become king. So he out here having an orgy out in public. So daddy did something daddy raped Bathsheba. I'm having outside orgies. My other brother rapes my sister. My daddy doesn't vindicate or exonerate her. And then it's just this whole lineage of things that happens that's tied to, again, our misperception, or misconstruing, or not viewing sex the way it's supposed to be. And if you look at that dynamic on a family level, you see how women who can be raised up in faith can be like, well, granddaddy did it and daddy did it, so it must be okay. This don't feel right, but everybody around me is okay with this. We're not speaking up and speaking out. We're not speaking truth to power. So yeah, daddy, my grandmama, she was somebody else's wife, but he killed their husband, but we're gonna sweep that up on the rug. And we're not gonna talk about how my uncle may have raped my auntie, and dad didn't do nothing about it. We just didn't talk about it. But if we don't call these things out for what they are and teach from maybe more of a womanist perspective versus a misogynist perspective or a patriarchal perspective, because even the way it's romanticized is David was God's favorite. He was this, he was that. but we never hear or never talk or extrapolate what Bathsheba could have been doing. Like, oh, she was bathing. That's what she was supposed. She was at her house. She got married. So she didn't get there was no way to defy the king unless with death. So again, we're talking about women who were in positions that could not exercise their full selves, their full efficacy, their autonomy to say no. So not only with her husband, she would have died. So, and again, on the next one about how we don't talk Ruth and Boaz. We romanticize that thing like, oh, well, don't send me no Boaz. I don't want no Boaz. Don't send me no Boaz. I'm good. Because we don't even talk about that Boaz was just simply there to fulfill a familiar obligation. That's all he was supposed to do. That's what he did. There was no partnership there. There was no love, trust, value. There was nothing there. If we talk about Ruth, let's talk about Ruth and Naomi and how that's the dynamic, that sisterhood between intergenerations of Black women or women of color should be versus Ruth and Boaz. And Naomi didn't do nothing but put Ruth up on game. Like, sis, go over there in that field. He gonna be there at this time. You real pretty, put your hair up, position yourself. He gonna like you. We gonna be good. We don't talk about, like, if you read the basis of the story, that's what it is. We don't talk about she went in and laid at his feet. Brothers and sisters, may I tell you that when she laid at his feet, she didn't really just lay at his feet. She uncovered his feet, and some believe, like I do, that she performed fellatio. And it was so good, the brother was like, you know what? This makes it easy to perform this familial obligation. But again, we romanticize this thing, and it keeps Black women especially so warped when it comes to sex and sexuality and how to express my boundaries. Because you're like, oh, God gonna send me a Boaz. No, sis, I was gonna say something else, but we can't. But Ruth went in and performed for her Boaz. And he was even more motivated to fulfill that familiar obligation that he had to do. Another thing that we can do to help shift our narrative is we have to remove morality from sex and view sex as a natural human function. And I know that may be hard for some of us in the faith community, but listen, I was literally in church doing church service, and I was watching this baby walk down the aisle. And Spirit started talking to me. And I was like, Spirit said, it's amazing how we teach babies how to use their feet, how to use their hands, how to use their mouths, how to speak, how to walk. When we teach them to walk, we say, tie your shoes. Don't run with sharp edges. When you cross the street, look both ways. When you use your hands, don't cut this way. Don't touch the stove. We teach them how to use their body parts safely, but we don't teach them how to use their sexual organs safely. Where does morality come into teaching how to use your body parts that may be sexual in nature safely? Where morality does not have a play in you understanding how to do natural human functions in a safe and healthy way. So in order for us to shift sexuality or shift our perspective about Black women at the intersection of HIV and sex, we have to change the way we view sex, because we always want to find somebody or something damning as a result of an HIV transmission. We always want to find something that was worthy of reproach versus us saying that maybe the sister or the brother didn't know how to healthily use their sexual organs because no one taught them. I know that it's a very unique perspective, but we have to understand that we have to rethink some things if we want to push the needle forward and not have so many Black women and Black men sitting in our churches who are impacted and affected or diagnosed with HIV. We got to take morality off of it. If we're here to serve the whole man, let me serve you wholly. I can't put condemnation. God don't even put condemnation on us. So I can't put condemnation. I can't put morality. I can't put those things that make you feel some sort of type of way in there if I have to reteach you or show you some things. Once we get all that together, then we really can have a reduction of harm when it comes to this like HIV epidemic that's running rampant in Black folks, period. If you want to take the subset of Black church, even more so. And since it is Southern HIV AIDS Awareness Day, and the South more especially, because the South has over 52% of all new HIV cases. Hands down. We in the South, we have over 50% of the Black population in the South. We only make up 12% to 15% of the population, but we make up almost 43% of all HIV transmissions. So if we take those numbers and start putting subsets, same gender loving man, Black women, we see that we are disproportionately affected and impacted by this chronic illness. So we have to find a way to reduce the harm. Again, reducing harm is serving the whole woman, mind and spirit, when it comes to sex. Like when we get into these first lady talks, we need to talk more about how we can, make sure her hair cute and make sure we feeding him correctly both inside and outside the bedroom. Like we need to understand how to be whole. Like what does healthy sex look like? What does getting tested look like? What does sexual health look like? Not so much on my, not teaching me how to perform fellatio correctly the night before my wedding, because I'm up front in front of the first lady and she want to make sure I know how to please my husband. No, this begins before I even meet a man or woman or whoever you choose to be with. So first, that's that harm reduction, because we need to teach women and teach folks in church how to navigate those boundaries in a way that is first healthy for me. If this is folks say, God, your body belongs to God. No, my body belongs to me. My body belongs to me. And through instruction, inspiration from the Holy Spirit, I understand what to do and not to do with my body. So we flip that, your body, because that teaches me that my body belongs to somebody outside of me. And that teaches me that I can't do what needs to be done to protect my body. No, my body belongs to me. If I'm first spirit and I have a body, it doesn't say I'm first spirit and then God loaned me a body. I'm first spirit. I have a body. This body is mine. It belongs to my spirit. So I get to rule and reign with the unction of the Holy Spirit on how to navigate and move this body. Teach from that perspective. Because if I realize that this body is mine and it is a temple unto God first, then I know I can't, that's my clear-cut boundary. Also in harm reduction, we need to understand that outside the 10, sin is personal. So what's a boundary for you might not be a boundary for me. But if we taught that and gave people the free will that Jesus gives us, then people will understand that's a boundary for sis. What you say, man of God, woman of God, that was something that was a disclaimer or disnomer or something that was a deal breaker for you, that's not gospel, because that's outside the 10. Sin is the personal missing of the mark. Your personal missing of the mark is going to look different from mine. But if I teach you that this is what safe, healthy reduction of harm looks like, you interject your own ideologies into that, because God gave you your own mind, and it's going to look different from person to person. Once you teach that, and once we get to the point that we build women up in that space, it won't be hard for those who have been diagnosed with HIV within the church to go seek care, because I'm a spirit, I have a body. This is my temple. I need to make sure my temple is at its best. So I've been empowered through the people in the faith community, people I interact with, to make sure I'm always at my best self, which means I need to seek care, which means I need to be in care, which means I need to adhere to my drug regimen, to stay on my medicines, to make sure I'm doing what I'm supposed to be my healthiest self. I'm not, running around the building and saying I've been healed if the test results haven't said that. I'm not being encouraged to stop taking my medicine. If I am choosing a healthy route, I'm completely holistic in that approach from top to bottom. But I'm being fortified by the word to be able to make these decisions to make sure I'm in my healthiest self. And doing that too for those who have not been diagnosed. When we change that thinking, it's almost you need to know your status. So it's a easy piece in my mind. It's a utopic framework. It'll be easier to get women to go and get tested, to talk about their status, because like, bruh, this is my body, and you want my body to become one with your body. So I know my status. What's your status? Because see, in our women's, the first, what is it, First Fridays for First Lady or something like that, we talked about that, and no. So, because this is my temple, and I know about my temple, I didn't know about yours too, because you want to lay on my temple. And I'm not trying to make it seem so comical, but sometimes it can really just be that easy if we shift the theology and about how we work this thing. And it's, and working through that, the reduction of harm, and then getting to the point that we're removing stigma. If we have these open, honest conversations about HIV awareness, I'm not saying it's not going to be stigma, but we can start demystifying some things. We can start breaking down stigma. We can start breaking down stereotypes. We can sit down with first ladies, bishops, talk, teachers, ministers, and have open, honest, candid conversations about what this is: STIs, STDs, sexual health, in the frame of faith, without it being leave your condemnation and your judgment at the door, because we're free to be us. If God gave us free will, we all will exercise his free will within this space. If he ain't condemning me, you shouldn't either, sis. Again, you need word for it, John 8, 1-11. He was not bothered about the Pharisees bring that lady up in there. He started right. God cannot have this unbothered at the highest level. So if Jesus wasn't bothered about her, why you? And we have to to me, it's like you really have to get to that kind of thinking about it. Like, what? I don't care what it is. How do I prevent it? What do I need to do? What does this look like within the framework of faith? And how do we help push the needle forward while we're serving the whole woman, HIV positive or not? And, it would behoove us to take these more practical approaches, because when if you look at churches across the nation, it's Black women in there by the tons. They make up the predominantly of all houses of worship outside of Judaism and Muslims. Those are only two faiths that are predominantly man. Everybody else is women of color. So we have to understand that the intersection of faith and HIV is just not faith and HIV. It's faith, HIV, healthy sex, sexual autonomy, sexual efficacy. It's all these intersections, boundaries, talking about hurt, understanding that a large portion of your congregation has been sexually assaulted by the age of 18. It's understanding those things. And the more of those check marks that you can check off, unfortunately, will make you more and more vulnerable for HIV or another STI, STD. So that's all I had today. I have concluded. I hope I didn't go over my 20 minutes. I don't have a clock.
You did it. You did it. Look, we were listening because thank you, first of all.
Thank you.
A lot of the texts that you covered, right, are texts where the male is glorified. And women, in the case, you talked about one of my favorite stories, in the case of Vashti, who was like, no, period. And I want to use that text in this moment to say to, we're talking about women in this conversation. So specifically to Black women, women of color, to say, it is okay to say no. Even if they attempt to dethrone you.
Come on.
Okay, say no. Because knowing that, like you said, a lot of us do not know that it's okay to say no. We do, a lot of Black women do not know that our bodies belong to us and that we have autonomy and that we can say no. And so again, I love how you framed it, because even if as you were talking, I was thinking about a mega church that I attended. If 1 in every 30 women will be diagnosed, with HIV,
Mm-hmm.
I went down the pew in my mind
Mm-hmm.
and started counting the number of folks. That means on that one side, there were 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 sections. In one section, which is the smallest section, at least 6 or 7 women in that one section will be diagnosed as positive.
Because that one pew probably fit about 30 people.
Right.
Uh-huh.
Possibly, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it could be more than that. And so if I multiply that 7 times 4 or 5 sections, that is 28 to 35 people that are sitting just on the floor, right, of this congregation.
At that one service. That's at 7.
Right.
That's at 8 o'clock service.
Exactly. And on Sunday morning, right? And so I think you lifted up so much of substance in the text that you lifted up, because first of all, a lot of women don't know that it's okay to say no, even if that no is to the what we called in a Pentecostal church the Joshua of the house.
Uh-huh.
The leader. They don't know that it's okay to say no to any male or female. Like, they just don't know that they have the right to say no. So I think that is a great point that you lifted up. Also, the responsibility that if there are 1 in 30 women who will be diagnosed, the possibility of it being heterosexual sex, right, is great. And so that responsibility is also dual responsibility to the men that they lay with, right? In order to be in those cases, in order to be diagnosed positive, right? And so I think the way, like you said, the way that we teach a text, we have to be really careful in the church about how we teach text around our body and the authority that we have over our body, and who we allow to have authority over our body. Right. And that all of our no's, there used to be a saying, I don't really hear much of it today. No means no, right? We don't hear that term a lot today, but no means no, and it doesn't matter who that no is to. We do own our body. What you were saying, you lift so much. The fact that the South has 52% of new cases. It's just the South. And we're 43% of all HIV transmissions. The South ain't that big.
No, because when we think about the South, we're talking about the 9 states between Texas and Florida.
Right.
That's 9 states out of 50. 9 states out of 50 houses over 50% of the entire world's United States population. Folks, over 52% of all cases, and Black folks make up 43% of their 52%.
Wow. So let me ask you.
Okay.
We focused a lot on the churches, right? And the churches respond, or the church's responsibility, even in how we teach, with how we serve women, Black women specifically, wholly. How can pastors and churches serve or help those sitting in their pews who are positive? How can they serve? Because a lot of pastors do have a heart to serve. A lot of pastors have, they may even have the capacity. Some may not, but some who desire to serve may have the capacity. But I think it's best that we ask those whose experience are lived experiences, how can the church better, and the church leaders better serve women, Black women specifically, who are positive?
I would say first, watch how, even if you didn't do like on a whole like face-to-face, support group level, because everybody may not be in that place to have like a support group. at church, because we still are talking about fear, stigma, stereotypes. I don't want folks in my business, what they gonna say, because we got to be realistic. Church ain't been delivered from that when it comes to HIV. So I'm not even saying that, but watch how we use terminology. Like a lot of times, what bothers me, and this is just me, like when I hear folks, and I've heard this at church, where they be like, oh, they had AIDS. I need y'all to understand the difference between HIV and AIDS.
Absolutely.
I need you to understand the difference. Or, the missionaries would come back, and we went into a village in Africa, and we had, lunch with, people who had AIDS or who were AIDS infected, and the church would go up. Why y'all going up?
Right.
You understand? Because you had lunch with somebody who had AIDS.
Wow.
And it takes the head to kind of reshape the speech. Like if y'all have to have, HIV sensitivity training, if you need to read books on what is stigmatizing language, if you need to understand that, our first response when we say prayers, and God, can deliver you from AIDS, and he can deliver you from diabetes, and he can deliver you. Sometimes, and this is just me personally, at this intersection, that tracks the thing, because it's like, it makes it track, because I remember one of my sisters in the faith was like, Dia, should I be praying for your healing? I said, no, pray for my peace.
Ooh, yeah.
Pray for my mind.
Wow.
And so if you want to serve me as a fellow church member, as a pastor, pray that I have peace with this thing. Pray for my mind. Pray that I don't get sick from taking the medication. Pray that I understand how to navigate this new life. Pray that I understand, like I get some unction on how to deal with this new normal. So it's not so much we go to the extremes, like we bind this HIV thing. Okay. But when I get up off the floor, what have you deposited in me to make me not want to stare at this pill bottle for 2-3 weeks before I take my first dose? What are you going to say that's going to make me not feel some type of way when I have to go see my case manager at their building that everybody knows what their building is? And because I got personalized data tags, they know that that's my car. So I park around back, or I take an Uber to handle my business because I don't want to be found at that building. So it may not be the immediate response is the diagnosis. It's pastors understanding what comes with that diagnosis and how you can feed me from that level, even if it's one-on-one, pour into me from that level, but also watch the way that we speak about HIV inside our churches, inside our passages, inside of our sermons, inside of our teachings, and then take the time to raise up HIV awareness days inside the church. Because if we want to be realistic, the saints stop having sex. The youth department is the largest growing department ever. And everybody in there ain't married, because if the whole church is Black women, who are they married to? So we got to be able to frankly say, if we got a church full of mostly baby mamas or single mamas, they having sex. So why not offer something that's going to be in place to help them understand to have sex in a healthy way where they can stop getting pregnant? But also safeguard them from transmission. So it's like normalizing the conversations. I hope that answered the question.
Absolutely. So kind of changing the tide, because that was powerful. Your answer was very powerful in that regard. Kind of changing over, like personalizing this series for an individual, right? Who may be viewing and is vulnerable and hurt because she just found out, she just got the diagnosis that she is positive. Speak to her, that person who is trying to navigate that vulnerability or that pain. Like, where does she go from here after a positive diagnosis? In this moment, right? Where does she go from here?
And she's someone who's like in church or just
Either
period?
or.
Just period. Okay, so a Black woman been diagnosed. First things first, I'm trying to walk back. It'll be 4 years in September, so it's still fairly new to me. So if I cry, y'all just let me cry.
Yeah. Hey, we here.
Walk back that moment. Feel all the feels. So many times Black women don't get the opportunity to emote. Okay. Emote the hell out of yourself. If that's crying, if that's shouting, if that's cussing, if you pray, because I know it's times I showed up for prayer, but I didn't pray, and God was like, I didn't come for you to talk to me anyway. So just download and go on about your business. It's becoming so radical in your self-care beyond the diagnosis that is other people be damned. Because I went through this whole hashtag radical self-care, and folks didn't understand it because it was the first year I was diagnosed and they didn't know. But I was weeding stuff out. I was pushing stuff out the way. I no longer allow things that did not serve me to take up space because it was do or die at that point. Because I knew that if this was not treated, it could kill me. And that's just being realistic. HIV untreated can lead to death. Not saying itself, but the opportunistic diseases, this and third, but also it can lead to a mental death. And so first and foremost, feel all the feels, emote, go through whatever it is that you need to go through, find a therapist, find somebody to help you walk through that things, because your self-coping skills are about to shift in another level. And you have to be okay with this change. It ain't your fault. Your diagnosis ain't your fault. Now you're going to have to understand what actions, and that's further on down the line, that you played to be able to get in that position. But the immediate, it ain't your fault.
Yeah.
Take that condemnation off. It's not your fault. So if you're just newly diagnosed and you're seeing this, it's like, it's gonna be okay. And I'm not one of those like, oh my gosh, it's gonna be, this is the greatest thing. No, this was forced vulnerability for me. It ain't nice. It ain't easy. This is what God commissioned me to do. I wish I didn't have to say nothing, but I did. But I understand that I am saying this because someone doesn't have a voice to speak. Someone to speak for you. But I want you to do the emotional work, the spiritual work, the stuff, you're going to have to face yourself in the mirror, because HIV diagnosis makes you pull back all them layers. And this guy going to be some stuff that's unrelated to this diagnosis, but it's going to be the fact that it led you in this direction. And you're going to have to face that and take the time, because the longer that you run from it, the longer you're going to have to deal with that in-between space. And it's ugly. And it's, the abyss is dark, it's dismal, and it's nasty. So it's going to get ugly. I ain't gonna make it sound like sunshine. It's going to be ugly. But the sooner that you deal with it, the sooner you can at least come out on the other side.
Awesome. Wow. Thank you so much for that. Because I think, for those who have the lived experience, right? The reality of that, but those who are on the outside looking in, have no idea of, we know the process of grief, right? But we don't know what that process looks like, and so thank you so much for that, because I think the assumption is just because we don't, not in most things, we don't see people just publicly breaking down and showing their emotions, but just to destigmatize and humanize the process of being, of just getting that diagnosis, the vulnerability that comes with that. Thank you for that. How can families support family members who are positive? And I put an S on that on purpose, right? Because if the statistics are what they are, 1 in 30, that means that we come to church sometimes and we sit infused as family. We may even sit separate, but there's 30 up there, there's 30 here, so that could possibly be more than one family member who is positive. And let's go here, especially if there was a positive person who had molested several people in the family, right? If that's how those family members became positive, just saying, for example, how can families better support family members who are positive?
How can family members best support? Because I had family members that ran away, and I had family members that personalized it and made it about them. And then my mother was just like, she put her boots on, was just like, let's go. I think for the most part, what you said about humanizing the experience. And if this person that you're supporting is a Black woman, understand that she gonna get real selfish and allow her to do that. Yeah. Allow her to be selfish. And I don't like to say selfish, I like to say self-full. Like, I got to become full. I got to change. My perspective has to shift to self, because the fight, if you want to call it, now becomes more than me just taking my medicine. It's like I need to focus on whatever this inner working is that's going on the inside of me that's come with this diagnosis. So don't bastardize her if she can't be there like she used to be, because we know that Black women are superheroes. I mean, my mom bought me a Wonder Woman cup, but sometimes you got to put the cup, you got to take the cape off. I got to take these bracelets off. I can't, I got to take all that off and just be in my humanity versus me trying to operate out of my divinity. So family members first can best support them by being to them what they've been to you. And it's not always about, let's talk about HR. No. Sis, how you feeling? Yeah. I cooked dinner. Let me come get you something to eat. Can I come wash your clothes? I mean, I have friends that was like, ooh, I'm trying not to cry. Who was like, what you doing? Get dressed. I'll be there in 10 minutes. Let's go get something to eat. You ain't washing no clothes, because the pressure and grief looks different for everybody.
Yeah, it does.
You ain't cleaned your room. So it's like doing those things. It's acts of service to a Black woman who's been a servant to you is everything. Because there's one less thing. It's like a study that shows that women who are in power, the first thing that goes when they have no more sense of normality is that their house becomes extremely junky, or they become messy.
Wow.
So when you serve that person, especially if it's a Black woman, not to be overbearing, but it's not, oh, call me if you need me. No, call me when you need me.
When?
Or matter of fact, what you need. Because we want to rush to the diagnosis, but the diagnosis brings so much other stuff to it. The fact that you came to wash clothes, I'm tired because my body is fighting. So you took my car to get some gas and you washed my clothes so I can sleep. Because me sleeping, for me, it made me feel less than, because I'm too tired to do anything. So I can't get to work, do all those things, work the business, work that. And so it started to make me feel like I was a failure. But my body was like, I can't go anymore. So when you do stuff, that's how you support them. Yeah, you want to make sure they're taking their medicine and, help. If you say, hey, have you thought of like having conversations about the wraparound services and not so much the diagnosis itself? Do you need help finding a therapist? How is is your pharmacist working out okay for you? Here's a Walgreens gift card, something that surrounds it without directly talking about it.
Wow. Thank you. What you said was so powerful, because, many times, even family members, in an effort to be there, the conversation
can sometimes be overbearing when it's mostly about the diagnosis. But it's what you said. Good morning, right? How you doing? What you doing today? And that is care. That, you know, that is showing, you know, that you care about the whole person, right?
Yes.
Say how you, because the assumption, what do they call it? Sometimes weeping wonders, right? Remember weeping wonder from Good Times, where every time you look up, she was crying about something, right? And everybody happy, but then if weeping wonder show up, weeping wonder is more concerned about your diagnosis than she is about these clothes over here that may be in a corner because you just didn't have the energy, you know. Yeah, thank you again for that, for helping those who don't know, our family members, our church members who a lot of times become our family members, right? So even, you know, our family members helping us to understand how we can better serve, helping us to better understand how we can serve. So last question, and I'm gonna get off your nerves.
Just fine. You ain't on my nerves, whatever.
I'm just saying, look, in Black women, right? 1 in 30. I can't let that go. That's a lot of, you know, I've been in some places. I've been in church. I've been at work. I've been at some public events. I've been, you know, in a room full of women there where there's at least 30 women, which means one of those 30 had just been diagnosed or has been diagnosed. So I can't let that statistic go. So taking that statistic of 1 in 30 who will be diagnosed to the women, all of the Black women who sit in the room, right, regardless of where we are. Encourage. What would you say to a group of Black women in a room who haven't thought about being tested, or maybe afraid to be tested because to not know the status is scary, to know the status is scary, but to come, you know, for some, maybe even for most, but to be walking toward any building, even self-testing at home, right? But not knowing their status. Talk to those women in this next minute about the importance of knowing their status.
Ooh, importance of, I can't say it's just important, but I always, because we know it's important, but the why is important.
Right.
It's again,
or even the importance of being tested, right? Let's start there. The importance of one, and we can make this it's a multiple question again, but of a one of practicing a safer sex or safe sex for some who may trust the person to not use a condom because he's so wonderful or they're so wonderful, whoever that individual may be. You know, regardless of their position, you know, like you said, sex hasn't stopped, and we can tell because the babies keep coming. And so at the end of the day, the importance of practicing safer sex, and this is not just for HIV, it's for STIs also.
Period, right.
So the importance of safer sex or safe sex for some, and the importance of testing.
Well, I like to call it healthy sex, because when we say safe sex, it implies there's an unsafe sex. And then we start that whole sexual politicking type of thing. No, all sex is sex. It's just healthy sex. And healthy sex doesn't just include a condom. Healthy sex means negotiating your pleasure. So healthy sex means I've negotiated my pleasure. I'm going to do this on my own terms. I'm doing this with clear conscience. I am here for this. This is healthy sex. I am here. Let's go. So when I say healthy sex, it encompasses everything from before the sex to include your prophylactics. So that's important, to have healthy sex, meaning I'm having sex within my boundaries. And this is for my pleasure. I'm not having sex to simply be of pleasure to somebody else, because it's my body, right? That's important because sex no longer becomes a power play. it becomes an exchange between two people, and it's a level of intimacy. When you have that, it makes sex be so much more enjoyable. Because I believe God is sex positive, and sex is supposed to be enjoyable. Why else would you have it? And if you're not having enjoyable sex is not healthy. It's important to get tested, because I tell folks all the time, HIV is one of the most, if you're going for an HIV like blood test, it's one of the most thorough tests that you will ever get, because when they draw their blood and all them vials, that report is like 4 pages long, and HIV status the last one on the last page. But it's a health. It gives you a synopsis of what's going on with your health. I remember I had a sister who had some stuff going on with her potassium. I said, go in and ask for a full panel. And she said, what? I said, yeah, full panels are usually for HIV, but go in and ask for a full panel. When she got the full panel, the doctor saw what was wrong with her. So when you go in and get a full panel, it's a full body. So it's not so much checking for HIV. If you get your blood tested for high blood pressure, for triglycerides, why not make sure that you're including HIV to make sure your sexual organs and the things that you have sex with are healthy as well.
Right.
It's important to know to get tested, because it's a part of healthy being. It should be included in a wellness check. A woman's wellness check, that should be included, because of the nature and the pathology of this illness, person to person. If we ain't virgins, if the penis or the vagina, because I was going to say something else, the penis or the vagina has not been in your pocket this whole time, you don't know. And that's just the premise of you get tested, because that penis or that vagina has not been in your pocket everywhere that you go. You don't have brain over that. So you look at that as, I need to know that status and my status. Yeah. Period, point blank. It's a part of health.
Yeah. Well, it doesn't get any clearer than that. And once again, thank you so much for what you shared. It's been so much substance, and I know those who couldn't join us in this hour will possibly and will go back and watch the replay. So I hope that there are those who are watching that have been helped. I know there'll be people who will be helped in what you shared with us today. Thank you so much again. For those who are interested, Sister Reach again is a reproductive justice organization in the state of Tennessee. We offer several programs, and to see those programs, you can visit our website at www.sisterreach.org. You can also order your safe or healthy sex kits at that webpage. Our safe sex kits, just go to down the menu on the side. We also offer a vacation body school where we discuss and educate young adults and youth about their reproductive and sexual health. And so again, see our website for those programs that we offer to help. Again, thank you, LaDeia Joyce, for joining us, and thank you, and thank you, and thank you. And you all have a great day. Thanks for joining us here on our Social Justice Preacher Series for the month of August.
Thank y'all.